I thought I could trust them with my savings, but as I opened the bank statement, I realized every penny had vanished. Margaret stared at the screen, her hands trembling slightly, though her face remained calm. She had always been meticulous with her finances, keeping a detailed ledger of every deposit and withdrawal, yet the numbers staring back at her now made no sense. The account she had shared with Lisa for convenience, believing it would simplify bill payments and joint family expenses, now reflected a glaring deficit. She remembered the conversation from a week ago, Lisa's casual tone as she suggested consolidating accounts for easier management, and Margaret had nodded, not suspecting the treachery hidden beneath that friendly smile. Every transaction she examined told a story she didn't want to believe. Money transferred to unfamiliar accounts, unexpected online purchases, and checks that never cleared. Margaret closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. She had learned over the years that reaction in the moment could be used against her. Lisa had a way of twisting situations, of making anyone who questioned her intentions feel like they were overreacting, so Margaret stayed silent for now, allowing the storm of confusion and anger to simmer beneath a surface of quiet dignity. She rose from the chair by the window, the sunlight casting long shadows across the living room, and paced slowly, trying to connect the dots, recalling minor oddities that had seemed trivial at the time. The sudden eagerness to take over utility payments, the insistence on handling online subscriptions, the casual comments about Margaret's outdated approach to money management. Each small incident now built a clear pattern in her mind, a picture of manipulation and betrayal. The thought of confronting Lisa immediately brought a rush of tension, but Margaret knew patience was her ally. She began to organize the evidence, pulling statements, transaction histories, and emails, arranging them neatly on the dining table, each paper a piece of the puzzle she intended to solve. Even as the betrayal sank in, there was a strange clarity in her mind, a determination that had been honed through years of facing challenges without panic. She remembered Michael, her son, and how he had always deferred to Lisa on matters he didn't fully understand, unaware of the quiet calculations happening behind her composed exterior. Margaret considered her next steps, knowing that confronting them too soon could alert Lisa, allow her to manipulate the narrative, or hide further evidence. Instead, she decided to maintain her daily routines, to act as though everything was normal, while she quietly built her case. Breakfast was prepared, the kettle whistled, and she poured herself a cup of tea, each movement deliberate, each sip a reminder of the control she still held over her own actions. The betrayal was personal, financial, and painful, yet Margaret felt a spark of empowerment amid the shock. She would not be a passive victim. Every email she drafted, every note she took, every record she meticulously reviewed became part of a silent strategy. The realization that trust had been exploited fueled a cautious resolve, and as the afternoon sunlight shifted across the hardwood floors, Margaret felt the first stirrings of a plan that would reveal the truth without compromising her composure, a quiet reckoning that would unfold on her terms while the world remained unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Margaret sat quietly at the kitchen table, her tea cooling beside her, the sun casting a warm glow through the blinds onto the polished surface. She traced the rim of her cup with her finger, the rhythm of the movement steadying her thoughts. The house was unusually silent, each creak and hum of the old appliances resonating louder than normal. She moved to the window and looked out at the garden she had tended for years, the roses in full bloom, their colors vivid and alive, a stark contrast to the unease she felt inside. Every morning she followed the same routine, preparing breakfast, checking mail, straightening the living room, each task an anchor to normalcy. Lisa had not mentioned any of the transfers or unusual expenditures when they spoke last, her voice cheerful, masking the intentions Margaret now suspected. Margaret reflected on the past few weeks, remembering small discrepancies, the subtle avoidance when she asked about bills, the offhand comments about certain accounts being too old-fashioned to manage, and the casual way Lisa had suggested taking over some responsibilities that now seemed calculated. Margaret sipped her tea, each swallow deliberate, letting the warmth calm the tension rising in her chest. She reminded herself that impulsive confrontation could give Lisa the advantage. Every glance at the phone made her muscles tense. She knew that communication could be monitored, misrepresented, or twisted. Margaret opened her ledger, flipping through pages filled with precise calculations, dates, and notes. Each line was a testament to her diligence, a map she now followed carefully, tracing back to where the first irregularities had begun. She jotted notes, numbers, observations, any small detail that might later confirm her suspicions. The quiet rhythm of her day allowed her mind to analyze without distraction, to catalog every interaction and transaction. She remembered Michael, her son, who often deferred decisions to Lisa, trusting her completely, unaware of the subtle manipulations that might have occurred under his nose. Margaret made a mental list of questions she would eventually need answers to, each one carefully considered to avoid revealing her knowledge prematurely. As the afternoon sunlight shifted, she walked slowly to the living room, arranging the papers in chronological order, noting dates, amounts, and any odd patterns that emerged. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, standing by the large bay window, the scent of jasmine drifting in from the garden, a reminder that life continued beyond the turmoil. The calm of the house contrasted sharply with the storm of calculations and plans forming in her mind. Margaret felt the clarity of purpose growing, a quiet strength that did not need to be expressed loudly, a determination to uncover the truth in her own time, using patience, observation, and precise action. Every detail mattered, every step taken with care, as she prepared for the day when the evidence would speak for itself, and she would respond with measured precision rather than haste or emotion. The following morning, Margaret moved through her house with deliberate calm, each step measured and purposeful. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the hardwood floors and casting shadows across the carefully arranged documents on the dining table. She had spent the night reviewing every bank statement, every email, and every note she had kept, each one contributing to a growing picture of deliberate manipulation. As she sipped her coffee, she recalled the moments that had seemed insignificant before. Lisa offering to pay certain bills, casually mentioning that Margaret did not need to worry about managing online accounts, and the gentle insistence that some decisions were too complex for her to handle alone. Margaret understood now that each of those moments had been calculated to build trust and to create a sense of dependency. She walked to the study, scanning the shelves for old receipts and ledgers, the memories of careful planning and saving flashing vividly in her mind. The house remained quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of birds outside. Every sound reminded her that she was alone in her vigilance, yet she did not feel lonely. There was a clarity in the silence, a sense of control she refused to relinquish. Margaret organized the documents into chronological order, noting every transfer, every check, and every unusual withdrawal. Each line in her notes was a piece of evidence, each calculation a step toward understanding the full extent of the betrayal. She allowed herself to feel the weight of the situation without allowing it to dictate her behavior, maintaining a composed exterior while her mind worked tirelessly behind it. The sunlight shifted, marking the passage of time, and she continued meticulously, connecting details that had previously seemed random into a coherent pattern. She remembered conversations with Michael, her son, who had praised Lisa for her organizational skills, unaware of the hidden agenda behind the polite demeanor. Margaret smiled slightly, not out of amusement, but from the satisfaction of seeing the picture becoming clearer with every note and observation. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and the lingering aroma of breakfast toast, grounding her in the ordinary while the extraordinary was being revealed in the papers before her. She paused to write a final note, summarizing her observations and ensuring that no detail, however minor, was overlooked. Each meticulous entry reinforced her plan, patience, observation, and strategic response. Margaret knew that she needed to continue her daily routines, to maintain appearances, and to act as if nothing was amiss while she gathered the evidence she needed. There was a quiet satisfaction in her methodical approach, a controlled energy that propelled her forward. As she looked out the window at the early morning light washing over the garden, Margaret felt a measured confidence, a readiness to address the situation when the time was right, fully prepared, fully aware, and entirely composed. Margaret sat by the window, the afternoon sun painting the walls of the living room in golden hues, her gaze fixed on the garden where the hydrangeas swayed gently in the breeze. She reflected on the past months, the small inconsistencies and subtle manipulations that had once seemed insignificant now forming a clear and troubling pattern. The ledger on the dining table held evidence she could not ignore, and each page reinforced the careful planning Lisa had undertaken to divert funds and control the household accounts. Margaret remembered how she had once trusted Lisa to manage certain bills, believing it would simplify life, never imagining that the trust she offered could be used against her. The sound of the refrigerator humming, the faint creak of the staircase, and the distant birdsong created a calm backdrop that contrasted sharply with the complexity of her thoughts. She sipped her tea, the warmth providing a small comfort as she carefully reviewed a new stack of bank statements, highlighting every transaction that seemed unusual or out of place. Margaret noted the dates, the amounts, and any correspondence associated with the transfers, each detail meticulously recorded. As she organized the papers chronologically, she found herself replaying conversations in her mind, Lisa's light tone and casual assurances now revealing a subtle undercurrent of control and calculation. Margaret allowed herself a moment to close her eyes, drawing in a slow breath, centering herself in the awareness that patience and observation were her strongest tools. She thought of Michael, her son, who remained unaware of the extent of the situation, and considered the best way to reveal the truth without giving Lisa an opportunity to manipulate the narrative. Margaret moved to the kitchen, straightening the counters and carefully arranging the documents she had collected, the mundane tasks grounding her while her mind processed the evidence. Each detail connected to another, a sequence forming that told the story Lisa had attempted to conceal. Margaret could feel a sense of determination building within her, a quiet power that did not need to be announced, only understood through her deliberate actions. She made notes on her strategy, listing questions to ask, details to verify, and the order in which to present them when the time was right. The quiet of the house allowed her to think with clarity, uninterrupted, and she used the time to strengthen her understanding of the situation, ensuring that every step she would take was measured and intentional. As the day progressed, the sunlight shifted, illuminating different areas of the room, yet Margaret remained focused, her mind steadily assembling the puzzle of betrayal and mismanagement. She recognized the need to maintain her daily routines, to act with normalcy, and to preserve the appearance of calm while she prepared to respond decisively. In this way, Margaret transformed the shock and disappointment into a quiet resolve, knowing that the evidence she had gathered would provide the leverage she needed to confront the situation confidently, thoughtfully, and without haste, ensuring that every action she took was grounded in patience, observation, and careful planning. Margaret felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere as Emily, her granddaughter, walked into the living room carrying a stack of magazines she had picked up on her way home from school. Emily, perceptive and attentive beyond her years, noticed the spread of papers and ledgers on the dining table and the meticulous notes Margaret had arranged beside them. Without a word, she sat down beside her grandmother, glancing at the highlighted transactions and the discrepancies marked carefully with colored pens. Margaret observed Emily's eyes, sharp and discerning, recognizing a quiet understanding, an intuition that mirrored her own careful attention to detail. Together they reviewed the evidence, Margaret explaining the context of each irregular transfer without revealing her full strategy, allowing Emily to grasp the seriousness of the situation through observation and subtle guidance. The air was calm but charged with silent purpose, the sunlight moving across the floorboards as hours passed, casting long shadows that mirrored the depth of their deliberation. Margaret showed Emily how she had traced each payment, each unusual withdrawal, and the corresponding dates, highlighting patterns that connected Lisa's casual assurances to the diversion of funds. Emily asked thoughtful questions, her voice low and measured, revealing her ability to process the information without judgment or alarm, and Margaret appreciated the clarity of perspective her granddaughter provided. They noted connections between email confirmations, bank notifications, and small anomalies that had been dismissed previously as routine or inconsequential. Margaret felt a sense of reassurance, knowing that she was not alone in perceiving the truth, that the careful observation and reasoning they applied together would strengthen the eventual confrontation with clarity and precision. She remained composed, performing ordinary tasks between their sessions of review, maintaining the appearance of normalcy in the household while the work of assembling the full picture continued. As the afternoon light faded into the soft glow of evening, Margaret and Emily carefully organized the documents, creating a timeline of events, detailing every significant action and correspondence, ensuring that each piece of evidence was verifiable and clearly linked to its source. Margaret felt the satisfaction of methodical progress, the quiet empowerment of knowledge and preparation, and the understanding that when the moment came to address the situation, every action would be deliberate, measured, and effective. The presence of Emily provided both perspective and silent support, a reinforcement of Margaret's intent to maintain control over her household and her affairs, strengthening her resolve to respond thoughtfully and strategically when the time was right, without haste or emotion. Margaret spent the morning reviewing the notes she and Emily had compiled the day before, arranging them into clear categories and checking for consistency across all documentation. The sun streamed through the tall living room windows, highlighting the neat piles of papers on the dining table, each one containing evidence of transactions, email exchanges, and financial records. She moved deliberately, her hands steady as she highlighted key entries and made margin notes that would guide the conversation she planned for later. Every observation she recorded was linked to a date and a source, ensuring that her account could not be disputed. Margaret reflected on how Lisa had skillfully created an impression of normalcy, presenting routine financial tasks as simple favors, while quietly diverting funds and taking advantage of trust. The patterns now stood out clearly, and Margaret felt a growing sense of empowerment as she realized the precision and thoroughness of her analysis. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth of the cup steady her thoughts, aware that patience was her greatest ally in maintaining composure and control. Each step she took reinforced her plan to approach the situation with careful timing, preserving dignity while preparing to confront the truth. Margaret considered how to sequence the evidence for maximum clarity, imagining the conversation she would have with Michael and Lisa, and the order in which she would reveal each discrepancy to prevent misdirection or deflection. She reviewed past emails again, noting subtle inconsistencies in tone, timing, and content, linking each one to financial movements that corroborated her suspicions. The process required meticulous attention and unwavering focus, which Margaret maintained, moving from ledger to email printout, marking, cross-referencing, and summarizing in a logical progression. As the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the floor, she remained absorbed in her work, feeling a quiet resolve solidify with every note made and every connection confirmed. Margaret knew that the moment of confrontation had not yet arrived, and she allowed herself to enjoy the clarity of preparation, the confidence that came from understanding every detail and anticipating every possible response. Her mind worked steadily, quietly building the framework of a controlled, composed, and effective response, transforming the shock and disappointment into deliberate action, ensuring that when the time came, she would have every fact, every number, and every detail ready to present with calm authority and precision. Margaret carefully gathered all the evidence she had compiled over the past several days, arranging the documents into a logical sequence that would allow her to present the full story clearly and effectively when the moment arrived. She double-checked dates, amounts, and email communications, ensuring that every piece was accurate and verifiable, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the organized stacks of papers on the dining table, each one a testament to the methodical diligence that Margaret had maintained throughout the process. She paused to take a deep breath, feeling a sense of quiet confidence as she reviewed her plan for presenting the information. Every detail mattered: the order of the documents, the clarity of the notes, and the manner in which she would explain the irregularities without revealing her full strategy too soon. Margaret considered the timing of the conversation she planned to have with Lisa and Michael, understanding that the impact would be greatest if presented calmly, without emotional outbursts, allowing the facts themselves to speak for themselves. She reflected on Lisa's previous behavior, noting the casual manner in which she had diverted attention from her actions, the subtle reassurances that now seemed carefully calculated to build trust while concealing misappropriations. Margaret sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth settle her mind and provide a sense of composure. The quiet of the house, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of the leaves outside, reinforced her focus, creating a space in which she could think clearly and methodically. She reviewed the evidence one final time, mentally rehearsing how she would present each point, considering possible reactions and preparing responses grounded in the factual record. Each step of her preparation reinforced her determination, transforming the shock and disappointment she had felt initially into strategic clarity. Margaret moved through her routine with deliberate care, tidying the living room, adjusting the arrangement of papers, and reviewing her notes once more, ensuring that everything was in place. The sense of anticipation was tempered by her calm, controlled approach, knowing that patience and careful planning would allow her to assert authority and reveal the truth effectively when the time was right. Margaret's resolve strengthened with each careful action, a quiet power growing within her, ensuring that she would address the situation with precision, clarity, and unwavering composure, fully prepared to present the facts, protect her interests, and maintain dignity while confronting the situation strategically. The evening light filtered softly through the living room windows, casting long shadows across the organized stacks of documents that Margaret had spent the day arranging. She sat calmly at the dining table, reviewing each piece of evidence one final time, ensuring that every transaction, every email, and every note was accounted for and clearly linked to its source. Margaret reflected on the patience and restraint she had exercised over the past week, understanding that the calm demeanor she had maintained would be her greatest asset in addressing the situation. Emily remained nearby, quietly observing, her presence a reassuring reminder that Margaret was not alone in her vigilance. Margaret reviewed her notes, considering the sequence in which she would present the information to ensure clarity and impact, noting how Lisa's previous assurances and casual comments would now contrast sharply with the documented reality. Each highlighted item told a story. Each organized page formed a coherent narrative, and Margaret felt a quiet confidence growing within her as she realized the thoroughness of her preparation. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, and the distant sound of traffic outside created a rhythm that underscored the meticulous nature of her review. Margaret envisioned the conversation she would have with Michael and Lisa, imagining the controlled way she would reveal the discrepancies, letting the facts speak for themselves, and maintaining an air of composure that could not be easily shaken. She considered the reactions that might arise and mentally prepared responses grounded in the evidence she had gathered, ensuring that each point could be made clearly and persuasively without reliance on emotion or confrontation. The quiet determination she felt was reinforced by the methodical way she had compiled the information, each step deliberate, each observation intentional, building a foundation for a response that was measured and effective. Margaret sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth as a calming presence while her mind worked through the final details of her plan. She straightened the papers, aligning them perfectly, and reviewed the summary of anomalies she had prepared, noting that the pattern of manipulation and diversion was undeniable. The evening deepened, yet Margaret remained fully engaged, her focus unwavering as she prepared mentally for the moment of revelation, confident that the evidence she had meticulously collected would ensure that the truth was undeniable. Each detail she had observed, every record she had cross-referenced, now coalesced into a powerful narrative of clarity, reinforcing her resolve to maintain dignity, demonstrate precision, and reveal the full extent of the situation in a way that was controlled, deliberate, and effective. As the house settled into quiet, Margaret felt a quiet empowerment, the culmination of careful planning, patient observation, and meticulous preparation, knowing that the time to act was near and that when it came, every element was aligned to present the truth unmistakably. Margaret took a deep breath as she finally reached the point where everything was ready to be addressed, the documents neatly arranged in chronological order on the dining table, and the evidence reviewed one last time for accuracy and clarity. The evening light had softened, casting a calm ambience over the room, and she felt the quiet resolve she had nurtured throughout this process settle into a focused determination. She called Michael into the room, her voice steady and controlled, inviting him to sit and observe the papers spread before them. Lisa followed reluctantly, her expression polite but guarded, unaware of the extent to which Margaret had prepared for this moment. Margaret began by calmly explaining each discrepancy, referencing the documented transactions, emails, and notes, connecting each piece of evidence to the corresponding time and event with precise clarity. She allowed the information to speak for itself, presenting facts without accusation, letting the narrative of manipulation emerge naturally from the organized data. Michael's eyes widened as he reviewed the records, the clarity of Margaret's presentation leaving no room for misunderstanding, and he began to grasp the scale of the situation that had previously escaped his notice. Lisa shifted uncomfortably, the tension in the room palpable but contained, as Margaret maintained her composed demeanor, neither raising her voice nor allowing emotion to cloud the presentation. Every piece of evidence was confirmed, and Margaret guided both of them through the timeline, highlighting patterns of misdirection and trust exploited, ensuring that the explanation was thorough and undeniable. She maintained steady eye contact, her body language calm and deliberate, conveying authority and control without confrontation. The room was silent except for the soft rustle of papers as Margaret indicated key points, allowing the weight of the evidence to settle. Fully with Michael and Lisa, Margaret concluded by summarizing the findings, the facts laid out with precision and patience, creating an undeniable narrative of the events that had transpired. She did not need to raise her voice or appeal to anger. The truth spoke clearly through the meticulous documentation she had prepared, and the impact was immediate and undeniable. Michael absorbed the information, his initial disbelief replaced by understanding and a resolve to address the situation appropriately, while Margaret's careful planning ensured that every aspect had been presented accurately and completely. As the evening drew on, Margaret felt a sense of closure and empowerment, knowing that her patience, methodical approach, and unwavering composure had allowed the truth to emerge fully and effectively, affirming her diligence, intelligence, and careful planning while maintaining her dignity and control.